Now I'm going to redo this demonstration. This time, use Terraform. I'm going to create a new CentOS SSH server with Terraform in AWS as an example. When creating with Terraform, we need to define our providers. I will define these providers in providers.tf. I'm going to be talking to Amazon and SDM via Terraform, so I need both providers here. One thing I won't show is that I have AWS credentials pointed to my AWS account. I have an SDM key pair generated here in Access, API, and admin tokens. I've given this particular key pair full permissions, but you may not need that for your setup depending on what you want to do via Terraform. This is the key pair. You notice it says API here. If you hover over, here are all the permissions. You may not need all these permissions, but this happens to be the key pair that I use. I want to make sure those SDM API credentials are echoed in my shell. You can set them in your environment or configure them in your .tf files themselves. That is how I export the access keys to my shell. Now I'm going to show my short variables.tf file. In here, I have AWS region, my instance name, and some tags that I like to use for my AWS EC2 instances. Next, I'm going to show my CentOS server.tf file. This is where I create the CentOS server. Let's walk through each piece. First, I'm using the SDM provider to grab the certificate authority public key with the data block here. I'm doing this so that I can paste it into the applicable file later so that the server will have the CA. Next, I'm grabbing my default VPC and availability zone for my new EC2 instance that I'm going to create here and here. Next, the EC2 instance. I'm calling a particular CentOS AMI here that I like and specifying the server size here, T2 micro. You'll notice that I'm attaching a key pair by default so that I can manage the server directly. I may not need this later, but I want to have it when I initially create it. I'm also attaching some tags, and this is where I'm merging some tags. I'm using a template for the user data block so that I can do the steps to add the CA automatically. We will look at what that looks like in a minute. You can see the data block at the bottom where I call the template file that includes the user data. Here's the user data command within the AWS instance, and it's pulling from a data block here. There's a template file, and within here you'll see that it's calling a particular directory and a particular file where I'll store my user data. Within that template file, we're going to be using the CA key, and I'm just going to give it a name. This will make more sense in a little bit. This is the template file that it calls. Notice that I'm using the CA public key and echoing it into the sdm_ca.pub file here from that variable we just saw. Next, I'm going to use the trusted users CA keys and paste that into the etc ssh sshd config file, and that is referencing the file we just created. I'm going to be restarting SSH because that's necessary once you change that config file. I'm also going to install a couple other things that I might like. And that's it. I can now do a Terraform plan, and if that succeeds, apply. Looks good. So I'm going to apply and auto approve. This step will take a little while, so be patient. Now that my apply is done, I can look to see what all elements exist in Terraform now. We can see the 2 data blocks and the 3 resources created for the AWS instance. So far, I haven't created any SDM resources. We can see in my SDM admin UI that I don't have any servers, roles, and I don't have a regular user. I simply have the admin user, which I'm logged in as, no roles, and no servers. Let's create a role. I have these files pre-positioned without the .tf extension, and I have a little shortcut in order to put them back with the .tf extension. You can see here the new role with the env equals AWS tag, SSH cert type, and name. And that's all there is to it to create a role. Let's do a Terraform plan. We can see the new role to be added here. Now I can apply. Once it is done, we can immediately see the role in the UI. There's the new role. Under access rules, you see cert-based type server with env equals AWS. You'll notice that there are no members of this role right now because I haven't added any regular users, nor did I add my admin user to this role. That will be in the next step. Now let's create the same user we had earlier in the demonstration. You'll see here that the user's first name, last name, and email address are all that's required in order to make a new user. I'm going to apply the Terraform. Already done. So I'm going to navigate to users and see the new user. Notice there the user. You notice here that it has no roles. Admin level user. Something I did off camera was to set up a password for that new user that I created. That will make the user ready to go. Now that we have a user and a role, let's attach the user to the role. This account attachment takes the account ID and pairs it with the role that we made. Once I apply this, the user will be part of the role. Now the user has the role. The last piece is to actually create the SDM resource itself. See here that we're pulling the public DNS name for the host name. We specify the username and the tags. Like in our manual demonstration, we don't need to specify keys, as the resource will use the organization-wide SSH server. Now we will apply this in Terraform. Now let's go to the admin UI and see our new SDM resource. Now it's here. You'll see under settings, grab the hostname, port, and username. At this point, we should be able to log in via our client and test the SDM resource. So I'm going to go to a different tab over to my MacBook, clear the screen, SDM login. I'm going to grab that user email, put in my password, do an SDM status to show what I have access to. I have access to this resource. So I'm going to do an SDM connect, or sorry, SDM SSH. And there I go. In this demo, I applied each Terraform file resource one by one, but in practice you'll have this configured beforehand, all these files configured beforehand, and only need to do a single Terraform apply, which makes this very valuable for creating, updating, and destroying resources. Thank you for spending the time with me today.